The scrapyard stretched as far as the eye could see. It was not a clean place of order or neat piles, but a broken landscape of twisted metal, shattered ships, and the skeletons of machines left behind by wars no one remembered anymore. Sharp towers of steel and broken weapons leaned like teeth of some dead giant, and smoke rose from rust where acid rain had touched it. For most, this was a graveyard of history, but for scavengers like Jaren, it was life. Jaren moved carefully across the jagged ground, his boots crunching on glass and old wires. He was thin, young, maybe 20 at most, with the hard eyes of someone who had known hunger too often. In his world, there were no easy meals, no safety, only what you could dig from the bones of war. The scrapyard was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of promise, broken things that could be sold, patched, or melted down into credits. And Jaren needed credits more than he needed fear. The air smelled of oil and smoke, and every gust of wind made the wreckage groan. Some said the scrapyard was haunted, that the machines remembered the battles they once fought. Others said strange forces slept under the ground here, forces that wanted to stay buried. Jaren didn't believe such things, at least not until that day. He had been digging near the base of a fallen gunship when he saw it. At first, it looked like another broken shell, half hidden beneath steel plates and tangled cables. But as he cleared the dirt and dust, he realized what he had found was no ordinary wreck. It was armor, black as night, smooth like liquid metal, and marked with strange glowing lines that pulsed faintly. It didn't look broken, it looked alive. Jaren froze, staring, his breath caught in his chest. Everyone had heard stories of mercenary armor, the kind worn by soldiers who were more than human. Armors that turned men into walking weapons, feared across planets. But those were myths, weren't they? Ancient tales told by old scavengers to scare children. And yet, here it was, lying in front of him, waiting. His fingers trembled as he reached forward. The surface of the armor was warm, almost too warm, as if it had blood running through it. The glowing symbols flickered, brighter now that he touched it. And then he heard it, a whisper soft and cold, not from his ears but from inside his head. It said only 4 words, "Put it back or die." Jaren yanked his hand away, heart pounding. He looked around quickly, but the scrapyard was silent except for the wind. No one was there. No voice had spoken. Yet the words still echoed inside his skull, chilling him to the bone. For a long moment he stood there torn. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it, to walk away, to pretend he had never seen the armor. But another part of him, the desperate part, the hungry part, whispered louder. This armor could change his life. If he sold it, he would never go hungry again, never fear the gangs that ruled the colony streets. Maybe he could even leave this cursed planet. The whisper inside had warned him, yes, but what was a whisper compared to the weight of poverty? Jaren crouched again, staring at the armor. The glowing lines pulsed in rhythm, like the slow beat of a heart. The more he looked at it, the more it seemed to call to him, not in words this time, but in promise. Promise of power, promise of escape, promise of something more than being a scavenger forgotten in the dust. He reached out again, slower this time, fighting the tremor in his hands. The whisper returned, sharper now, a hiss in his skull. Put it back, or die. He clenched his jaw, pushing against the fear. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe the stories about haunted machines had crawled into his head. He touched the armor again, and this time he didn't pull away. The ground beneath him gave a low groan. Metal shifted as if the scrapyard itself had taken notice. The glowing lines on the armor flared, bathing his face in pale light. And for the first time in years, Jaren felt something powerful flow through him. Hope mixed with terror. He should have run. He knew that. But his feet refused to move. The armor was no longer just lying there. It was waiting for him. It had chosen him. And far in the distance, beyond the walls of wreckage, something else stirred awake. Eyes that had been closed for centuries opened in the dark. The warning had not been an empty threat. It had been a promise. And Jaren had just broken it. Jaren did not sleep that night. Even when he left the scrapyard and returned to the rusted shack he called home, the whisper still clung to his mind. The armor's glow had faded when he pulled a tarp over it, yet he felt its presence through the cloth. It was not just a piece of metal, it was alive. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the faint light moving like veins of fire, calling him back. He tried to eat, but the food tasted like dust. He tried to drink, but the water turned bitter in his mouth. The only thing that filled him was the memory of the armor's power. The way it pulsed under his hand, the way the ground itself seemed to answer when he touched it. And that voice, put it back or die, it didn't scare him anymore. It teased him like a dare. By morning, Jaren made his choice. He returned to the scrapyard, his pack ready, his mind heavy with thoughts of what this could mean. He would not sell it to the local gangs. They would kill him for it before he got a single credit. No, this was bigger than gangs, bigger than the colony. This was a key, and keys were meant to open doors. When he pulled the tarp away, the armor waited in silence. The glowing lines still faint, as if it had been sleeping. But when Jaren stepped closer, the glow brightened, almost eager. It reminded him of a starving dog that suddenly smelled food. And he wondered, was he the master here, or was he the meal? Still, his hands shook with excitement as he lifted the helmet. It was lighter than it looked, almost weightless, and yet it radiated strength. His reflection warped on its black surface, his thin face stretched, his tired eyes glowing back at him like someone else's. He smiled, but the smile looked wrong. The armor seemed to laugh without sound. Jaren stuffed the helmet into his pack, wrapping it tight. Piece by piece, he uncovered the rest. Chestplate, gauntlets, boots, all fitting together like a puzzle. None of it was rusted, none of it broken. It looked as if it had been waiting for him, untouched by time. And that thought gave him both pride and fear. As he worked, he felt the whispers again, but softer now, not a warning. They were tempting, coaxing, promising. You are chosen. The voice seemed to say, you will rise, you will conquer. Each word sank deeper, filling the empty space where his hunger once lived. For the first time, Jaren didn't feel like a scavenger. He felt like someone with a destiny. But then the air shifted. A cold wind swept across the scrapyard, carrying the stench of burnt metal. Jaren froze, clutching the chest plate. From the shadows of twisted wrecks, he thought he saw movement. Shapes watching, waiting. He blinked, and they were gone. Maybe it was only his imagination, or maybe the armor had drawn eyes he could not yet see. He shook off the thought and forced himself to keep moving. He strapped the boots onto his legs, one after the other. The moment the clasp sealed, heat rushed through his veins. His knees no longer ached, his legs no longer felt weak. It was as if the armor was not clothing, but flesh, becoming part of him. When he tested his step, the ground cracked beneath his heel. A scavenger who once crawled in dirt now stood taller, stronger, dangerous. Still, the warning refused to leave his mind. Put it back or die. But death had been his companion for years. Starvation, gangs, sickness, death had always followed him. This was the first time something had offered him life. Why would he let go of it? Jaren laughed bitterly, the sound bouncing across the hollow scrapyard. Die? He whispered. I've been dying my whole life. The armor pulsed in agreement, as if it approved. He slid on the gauntlets, one by one, and a new strength filled his arms. The pack felt weightless, his breath steadier, his fear melting like smoke. But with the strength came another feeling, darker, something hungry, something not his own. He felt it under his skin like claws scratching to get out. By the time he reached for the chest plate, his heart was hammering. He hesitated, staring at the glowing lines running across its surface. They formed shapes, symbols he did not understand. But they moved, changing when he blinked, as though they were alive and speaking in a language only his soul could hear. His hands shook as he lifted it. The whispers surged louder, filling his head with voices that were not his. Not warnings this time, but promises of fire, of power, of conquest. The scrapyard seemed to lean closer, the broken machines groaning as if watching. He placed the chest plate against himself, and the armor sealed shut with a hiss. Pain struck him like a blade. Every nerve lit up, every bone screamed. For a moment, he thought the warning had been true, that the armor would kill him instantly. But then the pain twisted into something else. Strength, raw and endless, flooding every part of him. His vision sharpened, the world brighter. He could hear the hum of machines miles away, the crawl of insects under the dirt. The armor had not killed him. It had awakened him. And in that moment, Jaren realized the truth. The voice had never been trying to scare him away. It had been testing him, daring him, because now the armor was his, and nothing in the scrapyard or beyond would ever see him as prey again. But in the shadows, unseen, the watchers stirred, eyes glowing, weapons ready. The scavenger had taken what was forbidden, and the hunt was about to begin. The scrapyard had never felt alive before. It had always been a place of silence and rust, where broken machines waited to be forgotten. But now, with the armor clinging to Jaren's body, the air itself seemed to breathe. Every shadow stretched longer, every sound sharper, as if the world had woken up to watch him. Jaren staggered, his chest burning where the armor had fused. It wasn't just on him, it was inside him, wrapping around bone, sinking into his blood. When he moved his hand, the gauntlet responded faster than thought. When he took a step, the ground cracked under his heel. Strength that wasn't his surged through his veins, and it terrified him. He gasped, clutching at the helmet in his pack. The whispers had not stopped, only changed. They no longer hissed warnings, but sang like 100 voices speaking at once. Some begged, some commanded, some laughed. Together they formed one truth. You belong to us now. Jaren wanted to tear the armor off, but it refused. The chest plate was sealed tight, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The boots gripped his legs, the gauntlets locked around his arms. Every movement felt like being carried by a power far greater than himself. It was intoxicating, yet frightening, like standing at the edge of a storm and realizing the storm was inside you. Then the ground trembled. At first, it was only a faint vibration beneath his boots, but it grew stronger, rattling the heaps of broken metal. Shards slid down the towers of wreckage, clattering like bones. Jaren turned, heart racing. Something was coming. Out of the smoke between shattered ships, shadows began to move. At first, they looked like men, tall, thin, armored, their bodies stretched in unnatural ways. But when they stepped closer, the truth revealed itself. Their faces were not human, but twisted metal, melted into snarling shapes. Their eyes burned with the same glow that now pulsed through Jaren's armor. And when they opened their mouths, the same whisper that had haunted him spilled out. Put it back, or die. Jaren stumbled backward, his breath sharp. He wanted to speak, to demand who they were, but the armor spoke first. A deep growl rolled from his chest, a voice that was not his own. Come closer and be broken. The words chilled him because they had not come from his mouth. The armor was speaking through him, using his voice as a weapon. The twisted figures did not charge, not yet. They circled him like hunters testing prey, their glowing eyes fixed on the armor. One of them stepped forward, its body fused with the remains of a battle drone, its limbs clicking like gears. You are not worthy, it said, its voice grinding like metal. That shell will devour you as it devoured the others. It pointed to the ground, and Jaren saw them, bones scattered beneath the wreckage, skulls still trapped inside black helmets. Skeletons fused to armor like his. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Every one of them had died, wearing the same cursed shell. Jaren's stomach twisted, but the armor pulsed stronger. The whispers grew louder, almost drowning out the creature's words. They were weak, the voices hissed. You're not weak, you're chosen. Heat spread through his chest, down his arms, and when he raised his hand, sparks danced at his fingertips. The twisted hunters hissed in unison, recoiling from the light. The armor laughed inside his skull, a cruel, echoing laugh. Jaren's fear burned away, replaced by something darker. For the first time in his life, he was not the one running, not the one hiding. He was the one they feared. The scrapyard shook again as one of the hunters lunged forward, its blade arm raised high. Instinct made Jaren lift his gauntlet, and before he could blink, a wave of force burst outward. The creature flew back, smashing into a tower of wreckage, torn apart by the blast. Jaren stared at his own hand, stunned. He had not planned it, had not even thought it. The armor had done it for him. The other creatures shrieked, some in rage, some in fear. Their glowing eyes locked on him, their whispers filling the air. "You carry the curse," one of them hissed. "You awaken the war." Jaren backed away, his chest heaving. He didn't understand what curse they meant, what were they spoke of, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The armor had given him strength, yes, but it had also painted a target on his back. He was no longer just a scavenger. He was a thief of something forbidden, and everything in the scrapyard and beyond would hunt him for it. The whispers inside his head softened again, almost tender. "Do not fear them," they murmured. "With us, you are untouchable, unstoppable, unbroken." Jaren closed his eyes, fighting the storm inside him. Was this a gift, or was it a trap? The hunters circled closer, and the scrapyard groaned as if the dead themselves were watching. Jaren knew he had no choice. To survive, he had to embrace what was now part of him. And when he finally pulled the helmet from his pack and lowered it onto his head, the world shattered into light. The helmet sealed around Jaren's head with a hiss. For a moment, the world went dark, and he thought he had made a mistake. Then light burst into his vision, not from the outside, but from within. Symbols glowed across the inside of the visor, shifting like living script. The scrapyard no longer looked like rust and ruin. It blazed with hidden energy, currents of light flowing through broken ships, sparks of life flickering in dead machines. It was as if he could finally see the truth behind the world. His breathing slowed, steadier now. The fear that had shaken him only minutes ago melted into something sharper. Confidence. Power. The armor fit him like a second skin, and for the first time, he didn't feel like a scavenger wearing a weapon. He felt like the weapon itself. But the creatures were still there, watching. Their twisted bodies circled him, their glowing eyes fixed on the armor. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, its limbs fused with jagged steel and bone. It carried a blade of molten fire that hissed against the air. When it spoke, its voice was not its own. It was many voices layered together, deep and hollow. The warning was mercy, scavenger. It said, but you did not listen. Now the debt will be taken in blood. Jaren stiffened, gripping his gauntlets. "I don't want your war," he said, though his voice trembled. "I just wanted a chance to live." The leader tilted its head, the molten blade rising higher. "There is no living with that armor," it said, "only dying." The other creatures hissed in unison, their whispers filling the air. "Put it back, put it back, put it back." Jaren's heart pounded. For a moment, doubt clawed at him. Maybe they were right. Maybe the armor was not a gift, but a curse. Maybe he was just another fool, doomed to end up as bones inside a black shell. But then the armor itself pushed back. The whispers inside his skull roared, louder than the hunters. "They fear you," it growled. "They want to chain you, break you, steal you. You are chosen, not cursed." Jaren clenched his fists, sparks flaring from the gauntlets. The creatures hissed and staggered back. The leader snarled, stabbing the molten blade into the ground. The scrapyard shook, towers of wreckage collapsing in showers of sparks. From the earth below, more figures began to rise, clawing out of the dirt. Some were half machine, half flesh. Others were nothing but armored skeletons that still moved. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all drawn to the armor like moths to fire. Jaren stomachtightened. There was no escape. Every path was closing, every shadow filled with glowing eyes. The armor pulsed stronger, heat burning in his chest. It whispered like 1,000 serpents coiling inside his skull. Fight, Jaren, fight. Show them why you were chosen. He lifted his arm without thinking, and a blast of energy ripped through the air. It struck one of the creatures, tearing it apart in an instant. The rest screamed, their voices like metal grinding on stone. But they did not retreat. Instead, they surged forward, weapons raised. The warning was no longer words. It was reality. This was not a test. It was a hunt, and he was the prey. Jaren's chest heaved, his mind spinning. Every strike of the armor gave him strength, but also pulled him deeper into its grasp. Each blast of power felt less like his choice and more like instinct, as if the armor was fighting its own battle through him. The leader charged, blade blazing. Jaren met it head-on, their clash sending shockwaves through the scrapyard. Metal towers collapsed. Flames sparked in the dark. The battlefield was alive again, and Jaren was at its center. The leader's voice thundered in his head. You cannot win, scavenger. The armor will eat you as it ate the rest. Your bones will join theirs in the dust. But Jaren gritted his teeth, forcing the armor to answer with him. I'm not like them, he growled, his voice and the armor's voice fused into one. I will survive. The molten blade slashed across his chest plate, sparks spraying. Pain surged through his body, but instead of weakness, the armor fed on it. His vision blurred, then sharpened, his strength doubling. He grabbed the creature's arm and crushed it with one hand, the metal shrieking under his grip. The leader howled, pulling back, its molten fire sputtering. For the first time, the hunters hesitated. But hesitation did not mean retreat. They gathered closer, surrounding him. Their whispers rose again, no longer warning, but promising. D, D, D. And Jaren realized the truth. This was only the beginning. The armor had awakened. The warning had come to life. And now every shadow in the scrapyard wanted him dead. The scrapyard erupted into chaos. Jaren stood in the middle of collapsing towers, fire crackling through the wreckage, shadows screaming as they closed in. The armor pulsed hotter and hotter, feeding him power that felt endless, yet heavy. Every strike he made tore enemies apart, but every strike also dragged him deeper. He was no longer sure if he was fighting, or if the armor was fighting through him. The hunters surged forward, blades of molten fire, claws of steel, broken rifles sparking with ancient energy. They were too many, too fast, and Jaren knew he could not stand against them forever. The armor whispered quick and sharp inside his skull. Run, Jaren, run. I will guide you. The ground split behind him, and a path opened between the wrecks. Jaren didn't think. He obeyed. He dashed into the opening, his boots slamming down with thunder. The wreckage itself seemed to bend for him, broken ships shifting as if moved by invisible hands. The hunters gave chase, their shrieks echoing through the scrapyard. Every step was a storm, every corner a trap. Jaren's lungs burned, but the armor pushed air into him. His legs carried him faster than they ever had. The world blurred, his vision sharper, every detail lit by the armor's strange glow. He could see the smallest crack in the ground, the faintest shimmer of energy. He could hear the hiss of metal feet behind him, the scrape of blades through steel. And above all, he could hear the voices. Not just whispers now, shouts, songs, chants, some calling his name, some promising death, some promising glory. He turned sharply, darting between piles of broken war machines. The hunters slammed into the wreckage behind him, sparks flying. One leapt overhead, claws stretched wide. Jaren raised his gauntlet without thinking. A blast of raw energy tore through the air, hurling the creature into the sky. Its scream vanished in the wind, but two more filled its place, faster, hungrier. The armor whispered again. Left. Jaren swerved, and a molten blade slashed past his face, cutting a tower of steel in half. Down. He ducked, and a clawed hand swiped over his helmet, tearing the air. Run, don't stop. Jaren obeyed every command, even as fear gnawed at his chest. He wasn't sure if he was escaping, or if he was being led deeper. The scrapyard twisted into a maze. Narrow paths, walls of rusted ships, holes opening into darkness. The hunters poured in from every side, their glowing eyes endless in the dark. They were not slowing, not tiring. They wanted the armor. They wanted him. Jaren stumbled for a moment, and one of the creatures caught him. Its claws dug into his shoulder, sparks screaming across his chest plate. The pain seared through him, but instead of weakening him, it lit a fire. The armor roared inside him, a voice louder than thought. "Break it!" Jaren spun, grabbed the creature's throat, and crushed it with a single strike. The body collapsed into dust, glowing sparks fading into the air. The rest screamed louder, chasing harder. Jaren kept running, his breath ragged. The armor pulsed faster now, the lines glowing like rivers of fire. The whispers turned into commands, guiding his every step. Yet doubt clawed at him. Was this survival? Or was he being pulled into something worse? Ahead, the path narrowed into a tunnel of bent steel and wrecked engines. The air grew colder, thicker. The armor's whispers hushed, as if even it feared what was beyond. But the hunters didn't stop. They were right behind him, their claws scraping sparks on the metal walls. Jaren had no choice. He dove into the tunnel, the dark swallowing him whole. Inside, the light from his armor cast long shadows. Strange symbols were etched into the steel, glowing faintly like scars of old battles. The whispers returned, softer now, almost soothing. Deeper, Yaren, deeper. There is truth waiting. He ran, his footsteps echoing. The hunter's cries echoed too, closer and closer. Every sound in the tunnel was louder. The scrape of claws, the hiss of breath, the pounding of his heart. The chase was no longer just survival. It was a trial. Every turn he took, every step he made, pulled him closer to something the armor wanted him to see. The tunnel opened at last into a vast chamber. The floor was covered in skulls, broken helmets, shattered black armor like his. Jaren froze, his breath catching. The hunters spilled in behind him, surrounding the chamber. Their leader stepped forward again, its molten blade blazing. "This is where it ends," it said, its many voices echoing like thunder. "Put it back, scavenger, or your bones will join the rest." Jaren's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face inside the helmet. The whispers in his skull hissed like fire. "Do not listen, Jaren. They fear you. They fear your strength." But the sight of the bones on the ground made his stomach twist. How many before him had stood here? How many had thought they were chosen, before they were hunted down and buried in the dark? The chase was over, but the trap had closed, and Jaren realized too late. He had not escaped. He had been led, step by step, into the very heart of the curse. The chamber was silent. The only sound was the faint crackle of the molten blade held by the leader and the slow hum of Jaren's armor. All around him lay the bones of the dead, skulls trapped inside helmets, rib cages fused with black plates, gauntlets still gripping broken weapons. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all fallen in this place. It was not just a battlefield, it was a graveyard. Jaren's chest grew heavy. The hunters had not been lying. This armor had been worn before by men and women stronger than him, warriors who had thought themselves chosen. And every single one of them had died here. The glowing lines across his chest seemed to pulse brighter, feeding on his dread. The armor whispered, soft and poisonous. "They were not worthy, Jaren. You are different. You will survive." He shook his head, his voice cracking inside the helmet. "No, I'm not different. I'm just another scavenger." But the armor laughed inside him, a low sound that rattled through his bones. "Not anymore," it said, "you are mine." The leader of the hunters stepped closer, its burning blade lighting the chamber red. "You see now, scavenger," it said, "the armor is not a gift. It is a hunger. It takes and takes until nothing remains." Every warrior who wore it fell, their souls chained here, their bodies broken. As it spoke, the bones at Jaren's feet began to stir. Helmets turned, empty sockets glowing faint blue. Skeletal fingers twitched against the ground, reaching for him. Jaren stumbled back, heart pounding. The dead were moving. Their whispers rose, faint and hollow. Join us, join us, join us. The sight froze him. The black armor around his chest tightened, squeezing his ribs. His breath hitched. Was this his future? Would he end up like them? Another skull trapped in cursed steel, another warning to fools who came after? No, he muttered, shaking his head. The armor hissed angrily, its voice growing darker. Yes, Jaren, they were weak, but you are strong. I will make you more than human. Suddenly, visions flooded his mind. Not his own, but memories burned into the armor. He saw mercenaries in black shells marching across battlefields, unstoppable, cutting down armies like grass. He felt their power, their glory, their rage. But then the vision twisted. The same mercenaries screaming as fire consumed them from inside, their armor melting into their skin, their voices lost to endless whispers. He saw their bodies fall, one by one, until only silence remained. And then he saw himself, standing in the same place, his skull glowing under a black helmet, another prisoner of the curse. Jaren ripped the helmet off, gasping for air. His sweat dripped onto the bones at his feet. He wanted to throw the armor away, tear it off, bury it forever, but it would not let him. The chest plate clung tighter, the gauntlets locked harder. The armor was not clothing. It was a parasite, and he was its host. The leader's blade lowered, its burning eyes fixed on him. You understand now, it said. You are not the master of that shell. You are the prisoner. The other hunters hissed in agreement, their voices echoing like a choir of the damned. Put it back, scavenger, or you will join them. Jaren's knees weakened, his body trembling. For the first time since finding the armor, true fear pierced through the haze of power. The whispers inside his skull tried to drown it, tried to convince him. They lie, Jaren. They want to steal me. Do not give me up. But the bones at his feet told a different story. Every one of them had once believed the same promise, and every one of them had fallen. Jaren's mind spun, trapped between the voices of the dead and the whispers of the armor. Was he chosen, or was he cursed? Could he escape, or was he already lost? The truth clawed at him, heavy and cruel. This armor was not a path to freedom. It was a cage disguised as power. And once inside, no one had ever broken free. Jaren looked up, his eyes wide, his voice shaking. Then why me? Why now? The leader's blade flared brighter. Because the war is not finished, it said. The armor does not die. It only waits, and it has chosen you to wake it once more. Jaren's chest tightened, his pulse racing. The revelation was clear. This was never about survival, never about luck. He had stepped into something far older, far darker. The armor was not just a weapon, it was a warning, and now it had made him its next story. The chamber shook as the leader raised its molten blade high. The other hunters hissed, their voices filling the air like a storm. Put it back, put it back, put it back. The dead at Jaren's feet clawed at the ground, their empty sockets glowing, their whispers pulling at his mind. Join us, join us, join us. Jaren's body trembled, his lungs burning as the armor squeezed tighter. Every second it felt less like he was wearing it, and more like it was wearing him. The whispers inside grew louder, desperate, hungry. Do not surrender me, Jaren. Fight them. Take your place as God among men. He staggered, clutching his head, his mind caught between two worlds. The truth was clear. This was not power freely given. It was a bargain. Every mercenary before him had made the same choice. Every one of them had thought they could master the armor, and every one of them had fallen. Now, the same decision waited for him. The leader stepped forward, its burning eyes locked on Jaren. Put it back, it said, each word a thunderclap. Live as a scavenger, forgotten but free. Or keep it, and live as a god. For a short time, the molten blade pressed against the ground, fire cracking across the bones. The hunters leaned closer, their whispers louder. The dead groaned beneath his feet. The armor roared inside his chest. And Jaren realized this was the moment. There would be no escape, no running. Only choice. His hands shook as he looked at the helmet lying at his side. If he threw it away, maybe the armor would release him. Maybe he could return to the life of scraps and hunger. He would live, but live as nothing. If he put it back on, the armor would give him strength unlike anything the colony had ever seen. He would rise, feared and unstoppable, but only for as long as the armor allowed. It would burn him alive, just as it had burned the others. Jaren's heart hammered, sweat dripping down his face. The whispers inside screamed louder, fighting for control. Choose me, Jaren. You're not weak. You're not meant for dirt. You're meant for fire. The hunters hissed back. Choose death, scavenger. Join the rest. End the curse. The chamber vibrated, the air alive with voices. The bones rattled, the fire flared, the ground cracked beneath his boots. Jaren closed his eyes, torn between two fates. The scavenger who wanted freedom, and the warrior the armor demanded he become. His fingers brushed the helmet. The glow pulsed brighter, feeding on his touch. The voices of the dead screamed in warning. The whispers of the armor sang in triumph. And Jaren, standing in the grave of all who had come before him, took a breath. The leader raised its molten blade, ready to strike. The hunters surged forward, their screams shaking the chamber. The bones rose, clawing upward, and Jaren opened his eyes glowing with the same light that had consumed the mercenaries of old. The choice was made, but whether it was his choice or the armor's was no longer clear. The chamber erupted in blinding light, and the story of the scavenger was never the same again.